have potential, Violet, but management requires a certain maturity that comes with experience. Your numbers are impressive, but numbers aren't everything in leadership. Maybe in a few years, when you've grown beyond these innovative but somewhat impulsive tendencies." I sat perfectly still as Harrison leaned back in his chair, his patronizing smile never wavering. The other 4 executives nodded in agreement, their faces a unified wall of dismissal. My carefully prepared portfolio, documenting how I'd increased department productivity by 35% and secured our largest client ever, sat untouched at the center of the table. "But Richard was promoted to director last month," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the anger bubbling beneath my skin. "He's been here 3 years less than me." Richard brings a steadiness to his decision-making. Amelia, our HR director, chimed in. "He's demonstrated patience and prudence." What she didn't say. Richard was 43. I was 29. "I understand," I lied, gathering my materials with hands I refused to let tremble. "Thank you for your consideration." As I turned to leave, Harrison called after me. "Your ideas certainly have merit, Violet. We'll revisit this conversation when you've had more time to." Season. Like I was a cast iron pan, needing to be broken in. Like my 7 years with the company, longer than 2 recently promoted directors, meant nothing because I didn't have enough wrinkles or gray hair. I closed the door behind me with a soft click, though every cell in my body wanted to slam it. In the empty hallway, I pressed my back against the wall and closed my eyes. The worst part wasn't the rejection, it was knowing I'd been right about why I'd be rejected before I even walked in. "You're too young, too female, too outspoken." My colleague Dana had warned when I mentioned applying for the management position. "They'll never put you in charge, no matter how much money you make them." I'd wanted to prove her wrong. Instead, I'd given 5 people over the age of 50 the satisfaction of putting me in what they believed was my place. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Board meeting, quarterly review, 3 p.m. As head of my department, I was expected to present our results, the same results deemed insufficient to qualify me for advancement. Little did I know that in exactly 3 hours, every person who had just dismissed me would have their perfectly constructed world turned upside down, and I would be at the center of the storm. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told to wait your turn when you knew you deserved more, stick around. This story might just give you the inspiration, or the blueprint you've been looking for. Like this now if you've ever been judged by your age rather than your abilities, and subscribe to hear how this all unfolds. My name is Violet Keys. At 29, I had already transformed the marketing strategy for a mid-sized tech solutions company that had been stagnating before my arrival. I was brought in as a fresh perspective hire, a term I later realized meant young person we can pay less than an experienced professional while extracting maximum value from their modern skill set. I'd grown up as the middle child between 2 brothers, learning early that being overlooked meant having to work twice as hard to be noticed. My parents, a high school math teacher and a nurse, had instilled in me the belief that merit would always win out over politics. What a beautiful, naive thought that had been. After graduating with honors and turning down offers from several prestigious firms, I chose this company because the CEO, Martin, had promised room for growth based on performance, not tenure. "We're not stuck in the dark ages here," he'd said during my interview. "Results speak for themselves." For 3 years, that had seemed true. I rose quickly through my department, earning small promotions as I consistently outperformed targets. Then Martin retired, and Harrison took over with his executive committee of industry veterans. Suddenly, the metrics for success shifted. It wasn't enough to bring in results. You needed to bring them in while conforming to an unwritten code of corporate behavior that valued tradition over innovation, caution over calculated risk, and, most importantly, seniority over skill. I returned to my office after the rejection meeting, closed my door, and allowed myself 5 minutes to feel the full weight of the unfairness. Then I dried my eyes, reapplied my lipstick, and began preparing for the board meeting presentation. My assistant Demi knocked and entered with a sympathetic look. "I'm guessing from your face it went exactly as predicted?" "To the letter," I said, not looking up from my computer. "Harrison actually used the word season, like I'm a piece of meat." Demi leaned against my desk. "So what now, boss? Polish up the resume?" I paused, considering the question. The easy path would be to leave, to find a company that might value what I brought to the table. but something inside me rebelled at the thought. "No," I said finally. "Not yet. I'm not done here." What I didn't tell Demi was that 3 weeks earlier, I'd received an unexpected email from Elijah Turner, the chairman of our board, a man I'd met exactly once at the company holiday party. The message had been brief. "Your Q3 analysis impressed me. Would appreciate your thoughts on some broader company concerns. Dinner Thursday?" That dinner had been illuminating. Elijah, unlike the executive committee, asked questions and then actually listened to my answers. He wanted to know why our competitors were gaining market share despite our superior product. He was concerned about declining innovation metrics. Most surprisingly, he valued my outsider perspective. "Sometimes being inside too long means you can't see the forest for the trees," he'd said. "The executive team has decades of combined experience, but they're all experiencing the same market in the same way." I'd gone home that night and compiled a detailed analysis of our company's strengths, weaknesses, and untapped opportunities. I sent it to Elijah with no expectation of response. 2 days later, he replied with 2 words. "Very interesting." I hadn't heard from him since, and with today's rejection, I wondered if that dinner had been meaningless. Just another executive going through the motions of inclusion without any intention of disrupting the status quo. As I walked into the boardroom at precisely 2:55 p.m., I noticed something unusual. Instead of the standard quarterly attendance of just the board members and executive committee, there were several unfamiliar faces. 2 women and a man in impeccably tailored suits sat near Elijah, reviewing documents and speaking in hushed tones. Harrison approached them with the artificial warmth he reserved for people he wanted to impress. "So glad you could join us today. I think you'll be pleased with our presentation." One of the women, sharp-eyed with silver hair cut in a precise bob, merely nodded and continued reviewing her papers. I took my assigned seat at the far end of the table, arranging my presentation materials while trying to appear confident despite the morning's humiliation. Amelia caught my eye and gave me what she probably thought was an encouraging smile. I returned it with one of equal insincerity. At exactly 3, Elijah called the meeting to order. "Before we begin our standard quarterly review, I'd like to introduce some special guests. These are representatives from Monarch Investment Group, who have recently acquired a significant minority stake in our company." The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Harrison's smile froze on his face. None of the executive committee had been informed of this development, and that much was obvious from their expressions. "In light of their investment, we've been discussing the company's strategic direction," Elijah continued smoothly. "After careful consideration of our current market position and future challenges, the board has made some decisions I'd like to announce today." I glanced at my presentation notes, wondering if this meant I wouldn't need to present after all. Part of me was relieved, another part disappointed that I wouldn't have the chance to showcase my department's success. "Our company stands at a crossroads," Elijah said, his voice grave. "For 3 consecutive quarters, we've lost market share to more agile competitors. Our innovation pipeline has dried up, and despite having some of the most talented employees in the industry, we've failed to leverage their full potential." Harrison shifted uncomfortably. "If I may, Elijah—" "You'll have time to speak later, Harrison." Elijah cut him off with unusual firmness. "The board has unanimously agreed that we need to take decisive action now. We need leadership that understands both where we've been and where we need to go." The silver-haired woman from Monarch nodded, her eyes sweeping across the room and lingering briefly on me. I had the unsettling feeling she knew exactly who I was. "Therefore," Elijah continued, standing now, "effective immediately, we are restructuring our executive team, and I'm pleased to announce we've selected our new Chief Executive Officer." Gasps rippled through the room. Harrison's face turned an alarming shade of red. "Someone who has demonstrated exceptional analytical skills, innovative thinking, and a deep understanding of our industry's evolving landscape," Elijah said, his eyes finding mine across the long table. "Someone who has proven they can identify problems others miss and create solutions others haven't considered." My heart began to pound so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. This couldn't be happening. Not after this morning. Not after years of being overlooked. Elijah smiled. "I'd like to introduce everyone to our new CEO." All eyes followed his gesture toward the boardroom door as it swung open. The room collectively held its breath as the door opened. I expected to see some distinguished industry veteran, perhaps poached from a competitor. Instead, my colleague Parker stepped through, looking as confused as everyone else. Sorry I'm late, he mumbled, sliding into an empty chair. Elijah didn't even acknowledge the interruption. His eyes remained fixed on me. Violet Keys, he announced, will be taking the helm as our new chief executive officer, effective immediately. The silence that followed was absolute. Harrison's pen clattered to the table. Amelia's mouth opened and closed without sound. The other executives froze in various states of shock and disbelief. This is absurd, Harrison finally sputtered. She's exceptionally qualified. The silver-haired woman from Monarch interrupted, her voice cool and precise. We've reviewed Miss Key's contributions to this company extensively. Her strategic analysis of your market position was more insightful than anything produced by the current leadership in the past 3 years. I sat perfectly still, certain that at any moment someone would laugh and reveal this as an elaborate joke. But Elijah was walking around the table toward me, his hand extended. Congratulations, Violet, he said. The board has full confidence in your vision for the company's future. With robotic movements, I stood and shook his hand. My mind raced with contradictions, vindication and terror, triumph and uncertainty, all colliding in a chaotic symphony. I appreciate the board's confidence, I heard myself say, my voice steadier than I felt. I look forward to working with everyone to strengthen our market position and culture. Harrison's face had progressed from red to purple. This is a mistake that will cost us everything. She doesn't have the experience to… Harrison, Elijah cut in sharply. The decision is made. You can choose to support this transition or tender your resignation. Those are your options. The executive committee exchanged panicked glances. Just hours ago, they'd been a unified front dismissing my readiness for a minor promotion. Now they were facing the prospect of reporting to me. Perhaps, I said, measuring each word, we should continue with the quarterly review as planned. We can address the transition details afterward. Elijah nodded approvingly. Excellent suggestion. Harrison, you were scheduled to begin? What followed was the most excruciating presentation I'd ever witnessed. Harrison stumbled through slides that suddenly seemed inadequate under the scrutiny of the Monarch investors. When questioned about declining margins in our enterprise division, he deflected to Amelia, who faltered through a response about market pressures beyond our control. When my turn came, I presented my department's results with the same thoroughness I'd always shown, neither gloating nor acknowledging the dramatic power shift that had occurred. The Monarch investors asked pointed questions which I answered directly, including admitting where we'd fallen short of my own expectations. Refreshing, murmured the silver-haired woman, who I now knew was Gwen Phillips, Monarch's managing partner. As the meeting concluded, Elijah announced that my office would be relocated to the executive floor immediately. Harrison, please ensure Violet has everything she needs for a smooth transition. Harrison nodded stiffly, his knuckles white against the leather portfolio he clutched. As people filed out, Gwen approached me. Bold moves make people uncomfortable, she said quietly, but companies that resist necessary change become case studies in business school failures. We're betting you're the right kind of bold. After everyone left, I remained alone in the boardroom, trying to process the seismic shift in my reality. This morning, I'd been deemed too inexperienced for middle management. Now I was CEO of a company with over 300 employees and millions in revenue. My phone buzzed with a text from Demi. What is happening, HR? Just announced your CEO? Is this real? Before I could respond, the door opened and Harrison entered. Gone was the patronizing smile, replaced by barely contained fury. I hope you're satisfied, he said, closing the door behind him. Whatever game you played to manipulate Elijah and the board. I didn't play any game, I interrupted. I simply shared my analysis when asked. The board made their decision. Do you honestly believe you're qualified to run this company? His voice dripped with disdain. You may have impressed them with some flashy presentations, but you have no idea what real leadership entails. I met his gaze steadily. Perhaps not, but I'm eager to learn. Learn? He laughed bitterly. This isn't an internship, Violet. People's livelihoods depend on this company's success. When you inevitably fail, it's not just your career that suffers. His words struck a nerve, voicing my own deepest fears. What if I wasn't ready? What if the board had made a terrible mistake? The executive team won't support you, he continued. They know this is a mistake. You'll be isolated, second-guessed at every turn. Including by you? I asked. Harrison's expression hardened. I've given 20 years to this company. I won't watch it be destroyed by a diversity hire designed to please investors. The insult landed like a slap. Before I could respond, He placed a USB drive on the table. The transition files you'll need, passwords, accounts, active negotiations. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. 1 quarter? That's how long you have before the board realizes their mistake. I'll be waiting. After he left, I sank into the chair, the initial shock giving way to the enormity of what lay ahead. Harrison was right about one thing. I would face resistance from every angle. The executive team would be looking for any mistake, any sign of weakness. The board would be watching for immediate results. The employees would be confused and uncertain. And beneath it all, a question nagged at me. Why had Elijah and the board really chosen me? Was it truly based on merit, or was I being set up as a scapegoat for deeper problems? My phone buzzed again with messages from confused colleagues, but I ignored them. Instead, I picked up the USB drive Harrison had left, turning it over in my palm. My future, and the company's might, very well depend on what was contained in these files. The next morning, I arrived at 6, 2 hours before the office typically stirred to life. A security guard I'd never seen before nodded respectfully as I approached the executive elevator I'd never been authorized to use. "Congratulations on the promotion, Ms. Keys," he said, swiping his card to grant me access. "Thank you." I paused, searching for a name tag. "Ben," he supplied. "Been here 15 years. Good to see some new blood upstairs." The executive floor was eerily quiet, the plush carpet absorbing my footsteps as I navigated toward the corner office that had been Harrison's yesterday and was supposedly mine today. The door was unlocked, but the room was stripped bare. No personal items, no photos, no books, just empty shelves and a mahogany desk with a single folder centered on its polished surface. Inside the folder was a handwritten note. "The king is dead. Long live the queen. Don't get comfortable. H." I crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash, then spent the next hour connecting my laptop and reviewing the files Harrison had provided. Most seemed straightforward. Budgets, projections, client contracts, but several key files were corrupted or password protected with credentials he hadn't shared. At 8:30, my new executive assistant knocked and entered. She was older than me, by at least 20 years, with a perfectly maintained appearance that suggested nothing ever escaped her notice. "Ms. Keys, I'm Nora. I've been executive assistant to the CEO for the past 17 years. Through 3 different CEOs, from what I understand," I said, extending my hand. "I'm looking forward to working with you, Nora." She shook my hand with professional courtesy, but her expression remained neutral. "You have a full calendar today. The executive committee expects to meet with you at 9. Following that, you have calls with our top 3 clients, who are concerned about the leadership change. HR needs your signature on several documents, and Elijah Turner requested lunch." "Thank you. Could you add one more meeting? I'd like to gather all department heads at 4. Nora made a note. "Of course. Will there be anything else?" "Yes. Could you find out who changed the locks on the file cabinets in this office overnight?" Her expression didn't change. "I believe Harrison had concerns about sensitive information. I can request new keys if you'd like." "Please do. And Nora, I understand your loyalty to Harrison. He was your boss for a long time. But I need to know, will that loyalty be a problem for our working relationship?" For the first time, a flicker of something, respect, perhaps, crossed her face. "I'm loyal to this company, Miss Keys. My job is to support the CEO in doing what's best for the organization. Currently, that's you." As she turned to leave, I called after her. "One more thing. Could you please ask Demi from my old department to come up? I'll need her help today." At precisely 9 o'clock, I entered the executive conference room, where the same people who had denied my promotion 24 hours earlier now waited in uncomfortable silence. Harrison was noticeably absent. "Good morning," I said, taking the seat at the head of the table. "I know this transition is unexpected for everyone. I want to be clear that I'm not here to clean house or overhaul everything overnight. What I am here to do is address the market share we've been losing and revitalize our approach to innovation." Amelia spoke first, her voice carefully neutral. "We're all wondering about Harrison. Will he be staying with the company in another capacity?" "That's entirely his decision," I replied. "He's welcome to remain as Chief Operations Officer if he chooses. If not, we'll need to fill that position quickly." "And the rest of us?" asked Gerald, our aging CFO. "Should we be updating our resumes?" I looked around the table at these people who had dismissed me, underestimated me, and likely still thought I was unqualified. My instinct was to reassure them, to try to win their approval and cooperation. but something told me that approach would be perceived as weakness. That depends, I said instead. I need people who can embrace change and contribute to our growth. If that's you, there's a place for you here. If not, I let the implication hang in the air. The tension in the room was palpable. These people had never seen me as anything but a subordinate. Now I held their professional futures in my hands, and they were realizing it in real time. I'll be meeting with each of you individually over the next week, I continued. In the meantime, I need complete transparency. No hidden agendas, no withholding information, no sabotage. We succeed together or fail separately. As I stood to leave, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your personal email immediately. You need to see what Harrison didn't want you to find. A friend. I excused myself quickly, citing another meeting. Back in my office, I opened my personal email on my phone rather than the company network. The message had no subject line and came from an anonymous address. The body contained only a link to a secure file sharing service and a password. My finger hovered over the link. This could be anything: a trap, malware, or legitimate information. Who would risk reaching out to me this way? On my first day, I made a decision and clicked, entering the password. The screen filled with documents, hundreds of them, financial reports, email chains, meeting minutes spanning back 3 years. As I scrolled through, a pattern emerged that made my stomach tighten. These weren't random files. They told a very specific story, one of deliberate mismanagement, suppressed innovation, and something far more troubling. A knock interrupted my racing thoughts. Demi entered, her eyes wide with excitement. Boss, or should I say, CEO boss, this is insane. How did— Close the door, I said quietly. Her smile faltered as she took in my expression. What's wrong? I need your help with something, but it stays between us. Completely confidential. She nodded, suddenly serious. Of course. I turned my phone toward her. I need you to verify these without using company servers or leaving any trace. Can you do that? Demi's eyes scanned the screen, her expression shifting from confusion to shock. These are— Yes. Can you do it? Give me 48 hours, she said. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings. The client calls were particularly challenging. All 3 expressed concerns about inexperienced leadership, using almost identical language, suggesting Harrison had been making calls of his own. At lunch, Elijah provided more context about the board's decision. The truth is, we've been concerned for some time, he admitted, as we sat in a private dining room of an upscale restaurant. Performance indicators were sliding, but Harrison always had plausible explanations. Then Gwen from Monarch started asking harder questions during their due diligence process. And my analysis caught her attention? It did more than that. It confirmed suspicions we already had but couldn't prove. He leaned forward. Violet, there are aspects of the company's operation that may be problematic, things the board wasn't fully informed about. What kind of things? His expression turned guarded. I've said too much already. Just know that your appointment wasn't a snap decision or a diversity gesture, despite what some might claim. You earned this through insight and integrity. That afternoon, I gathered the department heads, 15 people representing every aspect of the company's operations. Some I knew well, others I'd barely interacted with. All looked uncertain about why they were there. I've called you together because you're the backbone of this company, I began. You lead the teams that make everything happen. You know your departments better than anyone. Their strengths, weaknesses, untapped potential. I moved away from the podium and sat on the edge of the conference table, abandoning formality. Here's what I need from each of you. Complete honesty. Not what you think I want to hear. Not what previous leadership expected you to say. The unvarnished truth about what's working, what isn't, and what you would change if you had the authority. Nervous glances circulated around the room. I understand your hesitation, I continued. Speaking truth to power is risky, so let me make this easier. Over the next week, I'll meet with each of you individually, off the record. Nothing you say will be held against you. I'm not looking for complaints or finger-pointing. I'm looking for insights that can make us stronger. Teresa, the head of engineering, and one of the few who had always treated me as an equal, spoke up. And if those insights implicate current leadership decisions, then that's what I need to hear most, I replied. We can't fix what we won't acknowledge. As they filed out, I noticed 2 distinct groups forming, those energized by the possibility of change and those resistant to it. The battle lines were being drawn. The next morning, Nora informed me that Harrison had taken a personal leave of absence rather than resigning outright. The executive committee appeared equally divided between relief and concern at this news. Demi texted me, "Need to speak privately, not at the office." We met at a small cafe 3 blocks from our building. She arrived with a secure laptop that had never connected to our company network. "I verified everything," she said without preamble. "It's all legitimate, and there's more." She opened the laptop, revealing a detailed timeline of events. Harrison hasn't just been resistant to innovation, he's been actively sabotaging it. Every major initiative from departments led by younger managers was either underfunded, delayed until irrelevant, or simply buried. Why would he undermine his own company? Demi's expression was grim. Because it's not just his company he's concerned with. She pulled up financial records, showing payments from our 3 largest competitors to offshore accounts linked to shell companies. He's been selling our research, client information, and strategic plans for years. My mind raced. The board suspects something, but I don't think they know the extent. "There's more," Demi said. "Remember that major client you brought in last year? The one Harrison insisted on taking lead on after you did all the groundwork?" I nodded, the memory still stinging. He's been systematically overcharging them while delivering less than contracted services. They're being audited next month, and when they discover the discrepancies, they'll sue us into oblivion, I finished. But who sent these files? Who would have access to all this information? "I think I know," Demi said. "The metadata on some of these documents shows they were last accessed by Nora's credentials." The revelation hit me like a thunderbolt. Nora, Harrison's trusted assistant for years, had been the one to reach out. But why? Over the next 2 weeks, I worked 18-hour days learning everything about our operations while conducting private meetings with department heads. The picture that emerged confirmed what the documents had suggested: a company being hollowed out from within by its own leadership. I also discovered why Nora had helped me. During our one-on-one meeting, she revealed that Harrison had taken credit for her financial analysis work for years, blocking her advancement while using her insights to bolster his reputation. "I've kept records of everything," she said quietly. "I knew someday someone would need to know the truth." Meanwhile, Harrison began calling board members individually, questioning my decisions and suggesting the company was in crisis under my leadership. Elijah warned me of these attempts, but assured me the board remained supportive. For now. Then came the first major test. Our largest client, the one being systematically overcharged, contacted me directly, requesting an urgent meeting. Their financial audit had indeed uncovered the discrepancies Demi had warned about. I had 2 choices: deny knowledge and blame Harrison's administration, or take responsibility as the company's new leader. I chose the latter, meeting with them personally to address the issues. "We've uncovered some concerning practices in our billing department," I told them honestly. "As CEO, I take full responsibility, even though these practices predated my leadership. I'm prepared to offer a full refund of all overcharges, plus a 20% discount on future services as compensation for the breach of trust." Their surprise was evident. They had clearly expected denials and legal posturing. "We appreciate your candor," their CFO said, "but this raises serious concerns about your internal controls, which is why I've already initiated a complete audit of all client accounts and billing practices," I replied, handing them a preliminary report. "Transparency will be the cornerstone of our relationship moving forward." They left satisfied, but the cost of making things right would impact our quarterly earnings significantly. I knew Harrison would use this as ammunition with the board. Sure enough, 3 days later, I received notice of an emergency board meeting called at Harrison's request. The agenda: addressing leadership concerns and financial irregularities. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. Everything I'd worked for could unravel if Harrison successfully convinced the board I was in over my head. The financial hit from correcting his misdeeds would look like my failure. His years of relationships with board members could outweigh my weeks of progress. As dawn broke, my phone buzzed with a message from Elijah. "Be prepared. Harrison has gathered significant support. This won't be easy." I arrived at the boardroom early, arranging my materials with shaking hands. Board members filed in, their expressions unreadable. Harrison entered last, impeccably dressed and radiating confidence. He nodded curtly in my direction before taking his seat. Elijah called the meeting to order. "Harrison has raised concerns about the company's direction under new leadership. He's requested time to present his perspective." Harrison stood, straightening his tie. Thank you, Elijah. Members of the board, I come to you today not out of personal grievance, but out of deep concern for the company we've all worked so hard to build. He launched into a meticulously crafted presentation highlighting the financial impact of my decision to refund our largest client, projecting devastating consequences for our quarterly results. While honesty is admirable, he said smoothly, inexperience has led to an overreaction that threatens our financial stability. This situation could have been handled through standard dispute resolution without such drastic measures. Board members nodded. Some took notes. My heart sank as I watched them responding to his polished delivery. Furthermore, Harrison continued, morale has suffered as hasty reorganizations have created confusion throughout the organization. Several key employees are considering departure, and clients are expressing concern about stability. He paused, looking directly at me. I take no pleasure in saying this, but the experiment has failed. For the good of the company, we need experienced leadership now more than ever. As Harrison sat down, the room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. I stood slowly, my mind racing. This was the moment everything would either fall apart or come together. 3 weeks of investigation, countless hours of planning, all leading to this confrontation. Thank you, Harrison, for your concern, I began. Before I address the specific points you've raised, I'd like to share some information the board should consider. I connected my laptop to the projector and pulled up the first document, a financial analysis showing the systematic overcharging of not just one, but 17 major clients over the past 3 years. The refund I authorized wasn't an overreaction, it was the bare minimum required to prevent a lawsuit that would have exposed much more. I clicked to the next slide. These are communications from Harrison to billing, instructing them to implement these overcharges while keeping clients in the dark. Harrison's face flushed. This is absurd. Those documents are clearly falsified. Are they? I asked calmly, clicking to another slide, because the billing department provided original emails with full headers and metadata, and our database logs confirm when and how these changes were implemented. Board members began whispering among themselves as I continued through the evidence, documentation of innovation, suppression, client mismanagement, and the systematic undermining of younger managers who posed any threat to Harrison's authority. But most concerning, I said, pulling up the final documents, are these financial transfers linking Harrison to our 3 largest competitors. The room erupted in chaos. Harrison shot to his feet. This is slander, a desperate attempt to divert attention from her own failures. Elijah raised his hand for silence. Harrison, these are serious allegations. Do you deny them? Of course I deny them. These documents could easily be fabricated. There's no proof. Actually, came a voice from the doorway. There is. Nora entered, carrying a thick folder. I've maintained records of every transaction, every directive, every client interaction for the past 17 years, including audio recordings of meetings where these decisions were made. Harrison's face went ashen. Nora, what are you doing? What I should have done years ago, she replied, placing the folder on the table. Telling the truth. What followed was the most thorough dismantling of a career I'd ever witnessed. For 2 hours, the board reviewed evidence of Harrison's systematic betrayal of the company's interests. With each revelation, his denials grew weaker, until finally he sat in stunned silence. When the last document had been examined, Elijah addressed Harrison directly. In light of this evidence, the board requests your immediate resignation. Should you refuse, we will pursue criminal charges for corporate espionage and fraud. Harrison looked around the table, searching for any ally, any sympathetic face. Finding none, he stood stiffly. You'll be hearing from my attorneys. He stormed out, the door slamming behind him. In the silence that followed, I felt no triumph, only a hollow vindication. I wish it hadn't come to this, I said quietly. Gwen from Monarch spoke for the first time. Don't. He created this situation through years of choices. You simply brought them to light. Elijah nodded in agreement. The question now is how we move forward. I straightened my shoulders. I have a plan for that too. Over the next 6 months, we completely restructured the company. The old executive committee was disbanded, replaced by a leadership team that blended experience with fresh perspectives. Merit became the only criterion for advancement, regardless of age or tenure. We implemented transparency in all client relationships, even when it meant admitting past mistakes. Initially, this hurt our bottom line. but client retention improved dramatically as trust was restored. Most importantly, we created clear pathways for innovation, ensuring good ideas wouldn't be buried because of office politics or threatened egos. When the year-end results were tallied, we had recovered our lost market share and expanded into two new sectors. Employee satisfaction scores reached their highest point in company history. At the annual company meeting, I stood before all 300 employees, feeling a profound sense of closure. 1 year ago, I was told I lacked the maturity to lead a team of 5. Today, we've proven that leadership isn't about age or time served. It's about vision, integrity, and the courage to challenge broken systems. I paused, looking around at faces both familiar and new. My revenge against those who underestimated me wasn't taking their jobs or humiliating them publicly. It was creating a company where that kind of discrimination can never happen again, where your value is measured by your contribution, not your birth certificate. The applause that followed wasn't for me. It was for the transformation we'd achieved together. As I stepped away from the podium, Nora handed me a note. Harrison took a position with our smallest competitor. They've lost 30% of their value since he started. I smiled, folding the note into my pocket. The best revenge wasn't just succeeding, it was changing the game so completely that those who tried to hold you back became irrelevant to your story. If this story resonated with you, remember that sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating your opponents, but from transforming the battlefield itself. Like and subscribe if you've ever been underestimated and found a way to prove your worth not through words, but through actions that speak louder than any argument could. And share your own story in the comments. How did you turn rejection into your greatest opportunity?